Welcome to the Two Fish Podcast, where we try to keep biblical truths simple. I'm your host, Nick Burt, along with my co-host, Aaron Apple.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. This will be the first episode of a three-part series on fearing God. If God is love, why are we called to fear him? That is our question. We're pulling this from Psalms 111:10, the NIV translation. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We come to this in our research, and we found that the fear of God appears in the Bible how many times?
Around 300 times.
So if it's in there 300 times, this has to be an important subject. So
Yes.
We thought we would dive into it. Like I said, we will have three different parts. The first part will be on the wrath of God, or the trembling fear of God. Part 2 will be on the fear of the outcome. Part 3 will be on the reverence for our God.
That's right. Here in this episode of the podcast, we're going to look into the fear of God, as in when it comes to context of trembling fear, of being afraid of the wrath of God. And this happens in the Bible quite often, where if you look, the first response to either whether it's the Spirit of God or Jesus with John in Revelation, or he sees Jesus in his true form, in his heavenly form, or whether it's even an angel, when you have that presence of God in some way, the first natural reaction is to be terrified.
Right. So I love to paint pictures and relate this to real life. And the one thing that came to my mind was that first time you meet your childhood hero, your favorite star, or favorite actor or celebrity, whatever you want to call them, right? Is your natural reaction to just be able to speak freely and converse with them? I don't think mine would be.
Absolutely not. If I was going to look back, I've been a kind of a Drew Brees fan for a long time. I liked the Saints when he was here in Indiana at Purdue. But that is not someone, after looking up from them, watching them in football, rooting for him, if I were to see him on the side of the street, I probably would be giddy a little bit that I'm seeing him.
I could see you being giddy.
I would be giddy. And then B, I wouldn't really actually know what to say or how to start the conversation. I would probably be like not knowing what to say.
Yeah. Mine would be, man, if I ran into Nolan Ryan on the street back when I was a kid, like, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't have been able to start a conversation.
No.
I would have just tripped over my own feet and probably fell on my face.
Yeah. And looked like an idiot.
Yeah. Naturally.
And then lost out on that conversation anyway.
Yeah. And he would have laughed at me and moved on with his life.
Yeah. So a biblical example of this would be the Israelites and Moses. In Exodus 20:18, when the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain and smoke, they trembled with fear and they stayed a distance. And basically what they did is say, hey, we don't want to talk to God. We're terrified. He's going to kill us. Something's going to happen and this is not going to be good. So Moses, you go talk to him and that'll be good for us. That'll be good enough. But then in verse 20, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning.
So this fear, this trembling fear, is supposed to help keep us from sinning?
Yeah.
Is that what they're trying to tell us?
So the simple way that I can think about that, since here we are keeping things simple, is God wanted the Israelites, to see him, not to see him, they couldn't handle that, but to kind of feel his presence in this thunder and lightning and the smoke, and to hear that trumpet. He wanted them to fear that, really what the verse in Psalms is talking about is a reverence, and we'll get to that. That's I think what we're actually called to do. But he wants us to not be afraid of what's going on in our lives or what's going on, be afraid of death or be afraid of this or that, whatever's in our life. He wants us to he wanted them to remember that experience that they had up on the mountain there and say, hey, don't fear that stuff. Fear me because I'm big. I'm God. And naturally they were terrified.
Trembling. Did this not show up in Matthew as well?
It did.
The disciples met who up on a mountain? Not only, but they met Moses, Elijah, and they were walking with Jesus.
They were with Jesus at the time, and he glowed. He probably looked more like himself as God.
Right? Would that would freak me out?
That would freak me
I'd
out.
be terrified. Somebody changes their appearance in front of you.
And two other guys just randomly show up, and they know who he is because they've studied these guys. They would have studied the Quran, and they would not the Quran. Yeah, Quran. Nope. What's the first 5 books? The Pentateuch. So they would have had some knowledge of these men, and they knew who they were, but they trembled in fear.
So this will be a good point to remind our viewers, Nick, that we are not biblical scholars.
We are not.
But that's all right. We, like we've said in our introduction podcast, if you haven't watched that we try to keep the Bible simple, and we are definitely not biblical scholars. But the natural emotion for us is to be scared of God if he is brought to our presence. And kind of reminds me of the first time I'd say I truly felt the presence of Jesus is you changed your life.
Absolutely.
But the next example in here that I like is the wrath of God. So after this, I looked at the Egyptians. So the Egyptians had enslaved the Israelites, right? They have put them in slavery for a number of years. They have, they're just working them, and their Israelites are just multiplying. That's what God said they're going to do. They're going to multiply it. And they just keep doing this. And the Egyptians are like, there's too many of them. Mm-hmm. They're going to attack us.
Yeah.
Well, what did they decide to do? We're going to kill their firstborns. So the Pharaoh at the time decided that all the firstborns of the Israelites needed to go. And I would say he had no fear of God, right?
The Pharaoh?
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
He didn't. The Israelites definitely did.
And he knew these were God's people. They all knew, the Israelites were God's chosen because it had been talked about previous.
So he got away with that for about 80 years, according to the research I found, Nick. He killed their firstborns and kind of got away with that for about 80 years. But 80 years later, God brought the wrath on him.
Yeah. He brought Moses
and
to lead his people out of Israel or out of Egypt.
They also killed his firstborn.
They did in a plague.
That was one of like 10 things that happened to him at that moment. But it took 80 years for that to come around. But that is a huge example of it. A trembling fear of God is when you do something that is blatantly sin. There will be consequences for that somewhere down the road.
If it's not right, then it'll be down the road for sure. In everyday life, I did not mean to actually stop that. I meant to pause it.
That's all right.
Dang it. Actually, I thought we were doing
just
all right.
Pick it right back up, can't you?
And then
Just hit
edit it.
record again.
Yeah. I meant to
You'll
pause
have to,
it.
like, if we put together a whole. So I got lost.
Yeah, I was lost too. I'm like, oh.
I knew these notes weren't right.
I feel like we were.
And it's going way fast. It was only like 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This
That
might
be all right. Like 20-minute episode first. That's why I didn't know what that verse was for. 6.
Do what? Yeah.
7.
I thought we were actually doing decent there. I just kind of lost track of what we were doing here, which I think we did good on everything we practiced right before while that was going off. Okay, so I said this earlier.
Yeah.
And I forgot it was down here too, so I feel like that would be a good. I can hit on that. Let's have some. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely. I think we got this page pretty decent.
I thought we'd.
Right.
Yeah.
But then, where my notes kicked in, which are all over the place. So the wrath of God, like my example of it was this story. So, and I think I'm missing something out of there.
Was the story of the Egyptians here?
Yeah. See, I think I changed some of this, and that's not the version that printed.
Is this all still part of this first
Series? Yeah.
episode? Okay.
Which I shouldn't label this like fear of consequences. I should just be there's another example of trembling fear, right? Instead of saying the wrath.
Yeah.
Like it's not an example of wrath, but I feel like that was like I don't know. The other one I used was Abraham when he's going to kill his own kid.
Yeah. Which is
all that.
Okay, so all right, let's
like I can
which I think
we can paint the picture of that, right? Like can you imagine you're walking into church, God just told you to take your one and only kid and sacrifice him.
Yeah. And I think that will go with actually being scared of God causes us to run from him. But having the fear of God causes us to run towards him, knowing how good his plan is for us.
I thought that fit in with
Yeah. No. Yeah. I had heard that. I had definitely heard that.
Then the next one was Job. So like Job feared God. It's described that way throughout the Bible. But Satan challenged God on the fact that Job has no reason to fear God. His life is so good that
But if
there's
if
no
you took all that away,
if you took all that away, is he still going to fear you, or is he going to blaspheme?
blasphemy.
Blasphemy. God's name.
Yeah.
I didn't have I didn't make it that far today. And then you brought in fear of God's when you're married.
Yeah. Did you like that? I heard someone say something real similar to that last night.
The other one, would be like, fear of your dad. Like,
Yeah.
when you did something wrong.
Yeah.
Who did you fear, your mom or your dad? They're gonna spank. Who was bringing the belt?
Yeah. Does one of those go good with? Probably dad could go good with consequences.
Yeah.
Does this? How is this? How does that go? How does the Abraham thing go with consequences?
Because if he was like scared of God, he would have just ran from that situation.
Got it.
Like he wouldn't even thought about taking his kid to the altar to sacrifice him. But he had a fear of, if he didn't do this, what would happen. So he went towards God with his one and only kid, knowing that he was going to sacrifice his kid to God. And ultimately the angel appeared, and he ends up not having to sacrifice his son, but
if you cross her, there will be consequences. Could maybe put that in there since I got that word in there.
I mean, this doesn't have to be like fear of consequences.
Yeah.
It's just another
example.
thing.
You're right.
We're pulling from. We're gonna. Well, we already did that first part, right? So, play back like the last 2 minutes of that. Where did we leave off? Like, are we just gonna try and pick up there, or are we gonna go back?
You want to just try it one more time? We're only 7 minutes in.
Yeah.
Let's do it. You got time?
Yeah.
You sure?
Almost 10, but yeah.
You got time?
Yeah.
Let's just do it one more time.
Good.
All right. This is last try of the evening. Last try of the evening.
We're going to get it.
We are. It's going to be good.
All right. So we're going to talk about this. All right. We're going to end up flipping the page. And our next example, are we going to talk about the Egyptians? Do we want to talk? Do you like that one? Do you not?
I don't really.
So just
I would have to read that one. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I'd have to read that better.
It's a good one.
And then I think just kind of picking up on being scared of God causes us to run from Him.
Yep.
So that natural fear is to freeze up or run from Him.
So we could even start that out with like being, who's bringing the paddle? When you screwed up as a kid, who was bringing the paddle?
Yeah.
You would run. I would run. I remember running from my dad. Yeah.
That's funny. I don't remember running, but I knew.
It never helped.
Yeah. Oh, no, it probably made it worse.
Never helped.
All right.
But
here we go. One more time. We got this. Volume up. Take 6. Welcome to the Two Fish Podcast, where we try to keep biblical truths simple. I'm your host, Nick Burt, along with my co-host, Aaron Apple.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us again in this 3-part series that we're going to introduce. We're going to be examining the fear of God. if God is love, why are we called to fear him? We'll examine this, like I said, in a 3-part series. This phrase, fear God, appears in the Bible how many times, Nick?
Around 300 times.
So if it's in there 300 times, it's got to be important and it's worth talking about.
Absolutely.
But what exactly does it mean? We're going to try and break this down in a 3-part series, and the first part will be on the wrath of God, or the trembling fear of God. Part 2 will be on the fear of the outcome, and part 3 will be on the reverence for God.
And all 3 of those are just a way to look at this fear of God. And this first episode here that we're going to talk about is the trembling fear, or the fear of harm, or fear of consequences of the wrath of God. And I think that is absolutely the most natural way to look at this verse, to fear God, to be afraid of God. We'll go through a couple examples here in a second of biblical times where